Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Old Parliament House tonight. My name is Linda Mottram. I'm the Canberra correspondent for Radio Australia, which is the ABC's Asia Pacific service. I'm sure lots of you know about that. Welcome to this national series of public forums called One Just World, Think, Talk, Act on Global Poverty and Development. The initiative is sponsored by the Australian Government's International Development Agency, AusAID, in partnership with the International Women's Development Agency and World Vision Australia. These organisations are joined by a university partner in each city, and tonight it's the Centre for Applied Philosophy and Public Ethics at our national university, the ANU. We're delighted to see you here tonight for Are We Fixing World Poverty? A report on the 2010 UN Millennium Development Goals Summit held in New York in September. And before we start or go any further, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we stand and pay my respects to their elders past and present. As many of you would know, respecting the rights and contributions of Indigenous peoples has been an increasingly important aspect of international development. One Just World is about providing a platform for ideas and discussion about important development issues and how to address them, to enable you to question people who are directly involved in development and to make your own suggestions and to find out more about ways that you can contribute. I'd like to welcome members of Parliament here and distinguished guests, indeed everybody. Tonight's proceedings are being recorded. The recording will be posted on the One Just World website later so that other people can join in our discussion at a later date. And we have 5 exceptional participants for you tonight to discuss the UN Summit and whether enough progress is being made to reach the global targets of reducing world poverty by 2015, and if not, what can be done about it. So let me introduce all of our guests before we get started. Our first guest really needs very little introduction. Kevin Rudd, our Foreign Minister, who's been in the portfolio since September, but whose deep interest in the field is well and truly known to everybody and well and truly predates his appointment. Just a little bit of background. He's a former diplomat in our embassies in Stockholm and Beijing. He played important roles in the Queensland Labor Party. He was later also a senior China consultant at KPMG Australia. Mr Rudd was first elected to the House of Representatives seat of Griffith in 1998, and he was Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs after the 2001 federal election. He later added international security and trade to his responsibilities. After being elected Labor leader in 2006, of course, Mr Rudd became Australia's Prime Minister when Labor won the 2007 federal election, and that was until June this year. Mr Rudd is also currently one of the 19 members of the United Nations Secretary-General's high-level panel on global sustainability, another issue, of course, that we know Mr Rudd has passionate views on. Please welcome Kevin Rudd. Mr Rudd will have to leave us at 8:30 for another engagement, but he is going to join in for some of our discussion. At the moment, he's going to give us about a 5-minute talk. Kevin, if you go over time, I will cough. Please.
Given how I've been feeling recently, I'll cough before you. I didn't do that. I really enjoy those long introductions. My father used to say, who was a Queensland farmer, when he heard long introductions, son, the bigger the hat, the smaller the property. The longer the introduction, Anyway, think about it. Let's talk a bit about the Millennium Development Goals. And it's good that we have a conversation nationally about this evening because they're important for the people of the world and Australia's connection with the wider human family. You know this as well as I, but when we began this century, we had 1.8 billion people of our human family who were living in extreme poverty. So what did the world do about that? They gathered in September of that year and decided to do something different. And that's 189 nations around the world, agreed on the Millennium Development Goals. It's worth, at the beginning of our discussion this evening, to remind us all what we solemnly committed to. First, to eradicate extreme poverty by 2015, the target being halving by 2015 the proportion of people whose income is less than $1 a day. Goal number 2, achieving universal primary education. The target, ensuring that by 2015, children everywhere would be able to complete a full course of primary schooling. Goal number 3, promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women. The target, eliminating gender disparity in primary and secondary education and in all levels of education. Goal number 4, reducing child mortality. The target, reducing by 2/3 the under 5 mortality rate. Goal number 5, improving maternal health by 3/4. The target, reducing by 3/4 the maternal mortality ratio. Goal number 6, combating HIV/AIDS, malaria and other diseases. The target, halving and reversing the spread of HIV/AIDS. Goal number 7, ensuring environmental sustainability. The target, halving the proportion of the population without sustainable access to safe drinking water. And goal number 8, developing a global partnership for development, the target being including addressing the special needs of the least developed countries in the world. These are the goals we set for ourselves back in the year 2000. What progress has been made? With less than 5 years to the deadline, as you know, the Millennium Summit was held in New York a couple of months ago, and I, together with other leaders and foreign ministers from around the world, made our remarks to the UN General Assembly on this. So how are we going on the positive side? Millennium Development Goal number 1, that is, by 2015, the number of people living in extreme poverty, reducing that by a half, and the definition being $1.25 per day. It's expected that by 2015, on current trajectories, that number will be down to 900 million, compared to 1.4 billion in 2005 and 1.8 billion back in 2000. That is where we are tracking as far as Millennium Development Goal number 1 is concerned. MDG 2, achieving universal primary education. What we see here is that the enrolment of children in primary education has increased over the past 10 years, with 40 million more children enrolled, translating into 90% of children formally enrolled in schools, as far as universal primary education is concerned. Millennium Development Goal number 6, combating HIV/AIDS, malaria and other diseases. Between 2003 and 2008, the number of people receiving antiretroviral therapy increased tenfold, from 400,000 to 4 million, corresponding to 42% of the 8.8 million people who need treatment for HIV. Millennium Development Goal 7, on the availability of clean drinking water. Between 1990 and 2006, over 1.6 billion people benefited from development programs that provided clean drinking water. That's where some progress has been realised. Let me point to you now areas where real problems are emerging. Millennium Development Goal number 4, improve maternal health. While almost all births are attended by skilled health personnel in developed countries, less than half of women receive such care in developing countries. And progress is insufficient to achieve the MDG target by 2015 of reducing by 3/4 from 1990 levels the maternal mortality ratio. MDG 3, promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women. The reality is girls in the poorest 20% of households are 3.5 times still more likely to be out of school than girls in the richest households, and 4 times more likely to be out of school than boys from the richest households. These are areas which therefore need radical improvement. What are we in Australia doing about it? As you know, the government which went to the elections in 2007, the then opposition, committed itself to increasing our ODA to 0.5% of GNI by 2015. We are currently on track to do that. Currently that figure stands at 0.33. When the government changed in 2007, it was 0.27, or a little less than that. What does this break down to in sectoral terms? We are increasing spending on education by over $200 million a year. Between now and 2015, Australia expects to allocate $5 billion in education programs as part of our overall development assistance program. Health, currently up by more than $100 million a year. Over the next 5 years, we plan to invest a further $1.6 billion to women's and children's health. In disability, the government has actually made changes here. We've introduced a new framework to include disability in development as a separate program within itself, and so far, since 2008-09, the government has allocated $88 million to development that specifically reaches and includes people with disability. The figures on disability themselves in developing countries are horrendous. And if we are to give, as I said to a gathering this morning, voice to the voiceless, the most voiceless of the voiceless are those in developing countries who are suffering from disabilities as well. We hope ourselves in Australia to become global champions of this cause. We've only begun our work. On climate change, Australia has committed nearly $600 million to climate change adaptation programs for least developed countries over the period 2010 to 2012. Two final remarks before we go to the general discussion. 2 days ago I commissioned an independent external review of Australia's aid effectiveness. Some people in the room may ask why. We currently have a whole range of audit mechanisms internally within AusAID. We have a whole range of external audit mechanisms through the Australian National Audit Office, and we are peer reviewed by various international institutions as well. And we are doing, through the agency, good work. But our judgment was this as a government. If we, as we have done in the last 5 years, have doubled our aid budget to what it now stands at being $4.3 billion a year, and over the next 5 years stand to double it again to something in excess of $8.5 billion a year, then it is important from the perspective of the Australian taxpayer that we are seen as delivering the most effective and efficient aid program that money can buy. That is also aimed at sustaining the domestic political constituency in support of this continued expansion of the aid program. That is why it's on. It's being headed by Sandy Holway, former departmental secretary here in Canberra, but also former head of the Sydney Olympics organisation, together with representatives from the NGO sector, from development economics, from the business sector and others. It will report by April. The last thing I'd say in his introductory remarks is this. We have begun the path towards radically lifting Australia's ODA engagement with developing countries. As I said, doubling the budget within 5 years and doubling it again in the next 5 is significant in terms of absorbing that and making sure it's properly expended. We are doing it because our overarching goal is this: poverty reduction. Millennium Development Goal number 1. All paths lead to that objective. And that is the core and overriding objective of our overall program. We also see it as part of a natural expression of who we are in the world. We believe in a principle of good international citizenship. This gives effect to that principle by what we seek to do with developing countries. There is much more to be done, and I look forward very much to the discussion with you all this evening. I thank you.